Hey, hello, Caterina. Thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat today.
Thank you, Francisco. Very happy to be here.
I'd like to start with a generic question because your background is actually in philosophy. So, how did you get into computational creativity?
Yes, so I took quite a long route to come where I am now. So my education was in music and philosophy. So I was a trained pianist, very classical, traditional background, and then I was doing my studies in philosophy at the same time, and then went on doing a PhD in the philosophy of music. So combining my two passions together. And I did my PhD at the University of Nottingham here in the UK, and it was around 2015. And I was doing this visiting fellowship at McGill University in Canada, and it was the time when generative adversarial networks came out, and it was the very big splash moment on what generative artificial intelligence can do in the realm of creativity. So my research at the time was on the ontology of musical works, so very theoretical research on the nature of musical works, but I was always interested in technology as well, and this new era of generative AI prompted me into thinking what can it change in respect to the nature of artworks when AI gets into the picture. So I started working on that, and then I did my first postdoc on the nature of creativity, so human and artificial creativity. And then, yes, I never stopped. And with this next new wave of generative AI, of course, there is a renewed interest in these questions and all the ethical implications as well.
Yeah, so you're currently based at the University of Edinburgh as a Chancellor's Fellow, and you have started there a cluster on creativity, AI, and the human. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Very happy to. Yeah, so when I joined Edinburgh, it was October last year, so a bit more than 1 year. And I started talking to people here who are working on either creativity or artificial intelligence. And there is so much going on at the University of Edinburgh around these topics, and many interesting people doing interesting research on that, but that do not necessarily talk to each other just because the university is massive, is very big, and there are a lot of people in different centers, different institutions. So I saw that there was maybe the need to create a space for these people to come together and share what they were doing and start new collaborations. So it really started as a group of around 20 people interested in the same questions, but it quickly gained a lot of momentum, and we are now more than 70 members, many of them also from outside the University of Edinburgh. So anyone who is working on these topics is welcome to join. It's a pretty informal space, so really the key aim is to foster interdisciplinary collaborations. So we meet once a month for our Share and Connect session, and then we have some events coming up in the spring, also like a conference on music and technology as well. So yes, it's a very exciting group of people, very large now. So there are many new connections within the cluster that are emerging, and that they are basically starting new projects, which I'm really glad that this is happening, because that was my aim, to facilitate this kind of connections. And maybe it's worth saying why there is the human as well in the title of the research cluster. Of course, yes, I'm working on creativity and AI mainly, but the human is still very much at the center of the discussion. So many of the discussions that we're having in the cluster and in my research in general is how can we make sure that the human remains at the center of creativity by using AI as a technology that can enhance aspects of creativity, but still, yes, without forgetting where we are coming from. So that's why the human is still there.
We're definitely going to get to this topic of human later on because it's something that really interests me. So I've mostly done in this field, behavioral studies looking into how we respond to AI. And I think that's one of the topics that is also part of another project that you're involved at ClearTech together with Adobe. But I'm going to keep that for a little bit. You were mentioning still on the cluster. I know that there's a lot of people involved, and obviously, the more people, the more topics that are discussed. But what's some of the trends that you can identify as to what people are looking at? What are some of the key topics that they've been working on, researching on? What are the trends that you identify within the cluster?
Yes, as you say, yes, there are a lot of different perspectives. Some people are working on music applications of AIs, other people in the arts, but also people from the sciences and engineering backgrounds coming in. But one of the patterns that I'm starting to see is around questions on how to preserve the creative agency of humans in this interaction with AI. So whether it is for artistic applications of artificial intelligence or scientific ones, still one of the key questions is how do we make sure that the human can have control on how we are using AI for this aim. And this might, of course, it's not an easy question, both from a technological point of view and also from an ethical point of view. From more a technical point of view, some of the directions that we're seeing are towards the so-called mixed initiative co-creativity. So considering creativity as something that is shared between the human user and the automated system, in this case, artificial intelligence, and seeing how the creative agency might be shared. So, for example, where is it that we might want to automate part of a creative process just because it's offloading boring tasks, for example, and where is it that instead it's important to preserve our control and agency. How we do that is one of the key topics from a more technical point of view, and from an ethical point of view. Of course, this brings up questions around attribution and credit, giving the right credit to all the human actors who are involved in the process, and how do we make sure that this is appropriately attributed. So it's very exciting because having this widespread of people from technical, scientific, and philosophical and ethical backgrounds, we really managed to have a discussion that covers from the development of the technology up to its use by users. I think that that's a key way to tackle some of these big questions that we have now around AI and creativity.
And before we get to some of the answers to some of these questions, you're also involved in another project together with Adobe called ClearTech, right? And one of the aims that you look into within this project is exactly to see how you can support creatives and what are the needs of creatives when co-creating with artificial intelligence. Can you tell us more about this project? How did it begin? What stage is it currently in? Can you tell us more about it?
Yes, of course. Yeah, it's an 18 months project that is funded by the Bridging Responsible AI Divide initiative here at the University of Edinburgh, that is supported by the UKRI. And it is, so the collaboration with Adobe is really one of the key aspects of it. So this is a fellowship. There are other fellowships beyond mine as part of BRAID that is precisely aimed at fostering this collaboration between academia and the industry. So I've been working with Adobe for quite some time, even before this fellowship, and this fellowship is a great opportunity to continue working with them. We just finished the first stage of the research, which was a longitudinal study with creative professionals. And the aim of this first stage was to look at the creative workflow. So really the creative process and how creative professionals, particularly in the advertising and marketing sector, are integrating generative AI tools in their practice to see where are the successes, the pain points, and one of the aims is to feed it back to the industry, the tech industry, in this case Adobe, to see if there are ways to develop these systems in a way that is mirroring and respecting the needs that users have in this respect. And now we are entering the second stage. It's actually very soon we are going to advertise a series of workshops that is going to happen in the spring at the Edinburgh Futures Institute here in Edinburgh. And these workshops are focusing on skills. So what are the new set of skills that creatives need to develop when using AI? It's maybe AI is not a tool as other tools that have been used by creatives before, and so we want to gain some understanding of what are the needs for new training opportunities or new educational pathways that creatives might need. So yes, this will be a series of 4 different workshops aimed at different stages of careers. So from early career to freelancers, people who work in agencies, and up to creative leaders. So just to map the space on different sets and kinds of needs across the board. And then the very last one, that's super exciting, it will be in August during the Edinburgh Festivals, and it's an exhibition around the theme of authenticity and artificial intelligence. So we're just going through now the applications that we received for this artist commission. It will be 3 artists who will be commissioned to do these artworks. And I was really amazed by the number and quality of applications that we received. So it's great to see how creatively artists are approaching these topics, which might be very philosophical in their in how they are approaching this issue of authenticity in respect to AI. So yes, I'm very looking forward to seeing who the 3 selected creatives will be and what they will prepare for this exhibition.
That sounds so exciting, and I think it's really interesting that from one perspective you're looking at artists where authenticity is such an important factor, right? I always discuss with colleagues defending that if you question the process or the motivation or the skills, you take away a lot from the artist, because in that field, right, authenticity and intentionality, these factors are so relevant. But on the other hand, you're also doing the project with Adobe looking at advertisers where, especially depending on the type of product, for example, low involvement products, if you're doing an ad for, I don't know, a peanut butter brand, or for, it really doesn't matter. So it's more about optimizing the process, right? What are some of the key and you also mentioned that the first stage of the project with creators with Adobe has already been concluded.
Yeah.
How do you see the differences in needs and perceptions in adoptions of generative AI tools when you look at, for example, advertisers and situations where the process or authenticity of process is not so relevant, compared with artists where intentionality, motivation, and authenticity is core of the value of what they bring?
Yeah, this is such an interesting question. There is, from what we observed during this first stage of the study, there is a key aspect where advertisers and people working in marketing are gaining a lot of benefit from using AI, which is the speed of generating outputs. As you were saying, in this kind of industry, being efficient and productive and having speed, being able to show your clients a scamp or a high level output at early stages of the process is really important. And this was probably the key aspect that participants to this study highlighted as a beneficial from the use of generative AI. But on the other end, there was another aspect that I think that advertisers and people working in this industry might have in common with more artists who work in this other sector of the creative industries, which is the concern that the use of AI might lead to a loss of the value of effort and the value of slowness that in general creativity has. So I know there is a lot of talk around productivity and AI, but this is a narrative that not always works for creative industries, where instead being able to sit down with your idea and play with it for a while before deciding what is the direction that you want to take for your creative process is important. So I think that even though the advertising and marketing sector has this requirement of being fast and productive and efficient, still creatives are starting to feel this pressure of being pushed a little bit too much by the use of this technology, and they want to go back and to their usual and traditional and more slow kind of processes.
And potentially a more enjoyable process as well, I imagine, right?
Exactly.
The factor of fun and enjoyment and hedonism in the creative process is so relevant.
Yes, and especially what they highlighted was how the very early stages of the process, when they are brainstorming on their ideas and creating many different types of potential avenues that they might take for addressing a creative brief, is still the most enjoyable part of the process, and that's usually done mostly offline, which is might be telling of
Exactly. And then on your answer, you touched on the aspect of value, right? And I'd like to now discuss the response towards generative artificial intelligence and creativity. In 2020, I was going through some of your publications. In 2020, you published a report where you did an online survey and then a series of focus groups look into the perception of creators. And I thought it was so interesting because so much has changed in 5 years. And those results actually potentially would be interesting to replicate, because I think the results will be so different nowadays. How have you seen, or what is your personal perception on the evolution of the perception towards outputs generated by or co-created with AI?
Yes, I was thinking about that study some days ago as well, and yes, it's just how much? Yeah, 4 or 5 years now, but really a lot has changed. I think that one thing hasn't changed, which is what I still observe, is the fact that when people know about the process through which an output is generated, their perception of the output changes. This is something that hasn't changed, and particularly in respect to AI, in my experience, it is still the case that when people know that something has been generated with the use of AI, they tend to devalue it and devalue the creativity that is behind it. So still, it seems that the humanness of the process is a value in itself, also for evaluating the creativity of the output. So that's why I in my research, I always focus on the process. I don't care much about the output, because I don't like, and this is what has changed really in these 5 years. 5 years ago, if we look at, for example, those AI generated images that I used for the study, they are interesting, but they're no way as good as the images that can be generated now with AI. And now it's even more the case that by looking at the output, we cannot take the output as a measure of creativity if our aim is to distinguish between what are the influences of human and artificial creativity in the generation of an output. Just because now AI is so good at generating not just images, but also audio, video, and other kind of outputs, that just looking at the output is not giving us a measure of what is the weight of the human and versus the artificial component in the process. So this is really what has changed. For me, I'm even more skewed towards let's have a look at the process now. And that might tell us more about what creativity is and how it is changing with artificial intelligence.
And one aspect about the process, which I find very complex, is the idea that in the end, the value is dictated by the public, right? But the public is not aware of the process. So how do we ascertain value of the process if the audience cannot have any sort of assurance? Because in the end, it comes down to a matter of trust in the communication, right? So for example, I'm a big Bob Dylan fan. And one of the reasons why I like Bob Dylan is because I imagine, wow, that guy at that age sat and wrote those lyrics, which requires an absurd knowledge of the English language, massive creative skill in doing that. Nowadays, I don't want to compare with you as a trained pianist, but I like writing songs. I'm like a typical songwriter, and I'm finishing an EP for my son. And if anybody, myself or anybody, releases a song now, the audience can question the validity of that process on the sense of saying, did you really sit and write those lyrics and those songs, or did you use any particular given tool? And that what goes back to what I was mentioning, that if you question the process, you kind of kill the artist, because the admiration and a lot of the value which is given to the artist is because of a process and the ability to come up with something which the audience cannot do and therefore admire the effort that it takes to get to that level, right? How can we support artists and creatives to make sure that their creative ability and that their skills are valued by the audience?
Yeah, this is such a deep question, and that opens up a lot of, I think, interrelated questions. Well, I would start by saying that I think that with this question we've come full circle, and we go back to the issue of authenticity. So what matters about, like, one of the key values of creativity is the authenticity of the process, and authenticity might mean a lot of different things. It might mean the respect of the original piece or the original material that was used, but also the authenticity of the artist or of the creative who has been involved in the process. And if we go back to 2010, more or less, when there was this maybe first wave of the relevance of craft, of the craftsmanship in respect to all the products that were generated on a mass scale at the level of the whole world, and instead was trying to go back to the value of craftsmanship and having individual and the local crafts valued. They were talking about that phenomenon as a phenomenon of authentic seeking, so seeking authenticity, so seeking the authenticity of the product. And I think we are at a similar point now with artificial intelligence. Now that it's possible to generate a lot of high quality content, many people are going back to questioning and looking at the process to try to gather an understanding of what is the authenticity of this process. So it is very difficult for creatives to make sure that their public knows about the authenticity of the processing of creation. There are some tools that they can use. For example, the C2PA technology and architecture now that has been used by many tech industries precisely aims at making sure that we can track the origin and all the contributions in the creation of a digital output. So this is something that artists and creatives can have in their toolbox to make sure that their public knows where is it that they might have used technology and where is it that instead it was their own original creation. But also, and this is a more general cultural phenomenon, if you look also on social media, now there are a lot of videos about the process of doing something and not just showcasing the end result. It might be not just in the arts and the usual creative sector, but also in cooking or in other activities. People like to show the process and people enjoy to watch the process. So it's always been the case, I think, that creatives are a bit shy, or maybe they don't want to showcase too much about their process because it's their trademark. But I see this as changing now, because by showing the process, they can ensure that their public and the audience knows that it was them in creating that specific output. So yes, I think that as a cultural phenomenon is very interesting how creatives are trying to grapple with this question and to build trust in their audience in this way.
When we look at parallel cases of the role of production on the value perception, for example, in the food sector, so how the coffee was brewed or where the fruits were, if they use pesticides or not, or how fashion products were created, what we tend to see on that literature is that the perception of relevance of those factors for the consumer is really high, but not translated in the point of purchase for a number of factors. One of them just being information overload. You cannot go to supermarket and check every single product, how it was made, and so on. So what we see is that it leads to a massive desensitization where, it's just another example of a contrast between attitude and actual behavior, right? That attitude behavioral gap where you would like that process to be in a certain way, but then at the point of purchase, so many other factors will come into play. In your perception, do you believe that we're heading towards a point of equal desensitization where if it's AI made, human made, we talk about co-creation, but again, co-creation is a spectrum where a human can have a lot of input or no input at all. Do you think in this entire discussion, just a general feeling, are we heading towards a massive public desensitization where the response is only what matters? The response of the audience is only what matters? What is your general feeling?
I think that my biggest fear in respect to the use of AI on a large and wide scale in the creative industry is precisely this is desensitization towards the value of the effort that is behind the process. So I think this is a real risk. As you say, there might be measures to counteract this, for example, making it as user-friendly and as easy as possible for the audience to access this information about the process. And they are talking about food labels also in the context of the C2PA architecture and the Content Authenticity Initiative, because that's exactly so the way how can we make sure that our audience, so the public and the user, can access this information in a very easy way without having too much to do to make sure that they access all the relevant information that they might need. But I think that yes, this is a real risk, and in my opinion, this is what is really concerning me. Of course, there are other ethical aspects of AI that are important to address and urgent to address, but this issue of desensitization is less talked about, and for this reason I'm more concerned. It's something that it's maybe more hidden and more difficult to tackle than, for example, giving the right credit and attribution. But yeah, it's similarly relevant.
Caterina, unfortunately, we're coming to an end. At least for me, the time has just flown by. So I have a few final questions for you, potentially to more like quick fire that you can answer faster. The first one, what are you most excited about in the intersection between AI and creativity?
Personally, what I'm most excited about is the opportunity that AI might give us to consider creativity as something that spans across different disciplines. I think that we are still linked to this idea of the romantic genius as an artist, and so mostly creativity is linked to the art sector. But creativity is in everything that we do. So I think that AI, given its broad application, can give us an opportunity to explore creativity also in other domains.
In the age of AI, what makes human creativity unique?
I think I would like to go back to this value of effort. I might be biased because with my training as a classical pianist, there was a lot of effort that was involved into it, but effort also means personal recognition and also like satisfaction, personal satisfaction in what you can achieve just by putting effort in the process. So yes, I would like to go back to the value of slowness and effort in creativity.
How's your current relationship with the piano? And is there anywhere where people can listen to your music, or do you compose as well?
No, I'm not a composer. I was always just a performer. I'm not performing in public any longer, so that stopped quite a while ago. I must say I was always interested when I also in my years as a student of piano, I was always more interested in the music as a concept, as a theory, and in the technology of the instrument. Then I've never thought of myself as becoming a professional pianist or performer. So that's not the road that I took. But one of the things that I want to do in 2025 is to devote more time to it. And going back to one of my passions, which were ancient keyboards, actually. So yes, so harpsichord and clavichord, and going back to that and putting more time into it.
And to conclude, regarding your project, the Createch, looking to the needs of creators and so on, to conclude, what would be your message to creatives that are concerned, skeptical, towards the influence of AI in creativity and humans as creatives? What would be your message for them?
I would say what I can observe is that there is a real dichotomy now in the creative sector, where there are people who are adopters and enthusiasts about using AI as a technology for enhancing their creativity, and another group that is totally skeptic and against it. I would advise both sides to be a bit more nuanced and look in the middle of the spectrum. So for people who just don't want to have anything to do with AI, to just try it, because that might demystify what AI can do, and maybe people can find alternative and creative ways to instead integrate it in their workflow in a beneficial way. And for enthusiasts, I think is great to experiment with AI, but still what I try to say also when I give talk to the creative industries is always to have in mind why you are using it. I think the environmental concerns now regarding AI are more and more pressing, and we need also as individuals to consider, if I am using this technology, do I really need to use it, or would it be instead better not to use it and use other means, just because of the environmental impact that it has as well. So consider the values that you have as a creative, and then how AI can help you in these values. So start with your values instead of starting with the technology. Yeah.
Caterina, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Francisco. That's been fun. Thank you.